Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Denes Boros, and today I'm going to talk about a true Christmas special, the Christmas Tree Variation. This time our protagonist will be none other than the famous Spanish Grandmaster David Anton, or as others call him, El Niño, the kid. So let's dig in. Now, in this position, which comes from the Dutch defense, white usually goes g3, and that's actually the origin of the Christmas tree variation, which continues as castles, bishop g7, e6, castles, and d6 followed up next. This is actually been introduced by Vladimir Malanyuk, the legendary Ukrainian grandmaster, and the other players who popularized it is none other than the famous Muzyczuk sisters themselves, Maria and Anna Muzyczuk. However, in this game between Mustafa Yilmaz and Anton Guijarro, here e3 was played. However, the good thing about systems that they're transforming, and you can sometimes use it in one system and transport it to another one. So here, David Anton actually does that and uses the same old system against e3 that was possible versus g3, bishop e2, e6. Now, this is called the Christmas tree formation because of all these pawns taking up the shape of a Christmas tree. b4, d6. And this is actually the idea behind this system. Black is trying to stop any advances with d5, because if in case of d5, for example, if white goes castles, d6, d5, black can just go e5, sidestepping this threat, and there is no threat of ever taking d takes e6 because the pawn gave that option earlier to be taken. Therefore, en passant is impossible. Here, in case of b4, d6, d5 already is too dangerous because there's knight e4 with heavy pressure on the long diagonal, leading to material loss for white. So Yilmaz, the strong Turkish grandmaster, decided to castle instead. Queen e7, same old idea. David Anton is preparing this break of e5, and if he succeeds, he'll have two pawns in the center and only one pawn for white, which would mean that David Anton would be already sort of taking over. Queen b3, trying to put pressure on this diagonal. a5, trying to push this pawn away. Note that white can't keep the structure intact with a3. White has to play b5, because if a3, then black can take. And if pawn takes, this rook would be undefended. So in fact, Yilmaz is one tempo short of consolidating. b5, knight d7. So as David Anton made sure that there is no real play on the queen side, he's slowly coming towards pushing that pawn. But Yilmaz says no, no, no. Goes bishop a3 and tries to stop David Anton from actually making that break. If white would face e5, d takes e5 is much, much stronger than before, as this bishop is lurking there, putting pressure on the d6 square with c5 check on tap. In fact, if bishop b2 was played, here black could also go b6 and do the double fianchetto and put pressure on white's position that way. So bishop a3 is played, b6. Still very flexible by David Anton, also trying to do the same formation as after bishop b2. Rook fd1, and as absurd as it might seem, rook fd1 is a mistake, but more about that later. Rook d1, bishop b7, and in fact, we can say that David Anton's idea of following the Christmas tree structure succeeded, as he has more control of the e4 square and e5 is about to happen. c5 breaks don't really work, as black has just too many pieces controlling that square. Knight goes to c5. And here Mustafa played knight e5, which looks very tempting. However, this was already a mistake, due to this move, rook fd1, being inaccurate, and I'll tell you why. After knight takes c5, d takes c5, and David Anton's knight g4, not only does this knight attack this e5 pawn, but also attacks the f2 and h2 pawns, with the queen sort of lurking in the corner on h4, not to mention that suddenly that bishop on g7, which was closed in by the pawns on d4 and the pawn on e3, is no longer contained, and this bishop is also coming to power over there. So it turns out that white should have considered playing knight e5 first, as in that case this pawn on f2 would have been defended. But one slip is enough when you're facing a super talent like David Anton, and let's see how he makes short work of white. Knight takes e5, knight g4. Suddenly all of those pieces and pawns are under attack. This knight is under attack on c3, and queen h4 will set up some deadly threats. E takes d6, queen h4, again electrifying the f2 and h2 pawns. Bishop takes, f takes g4, and you can see that every move is coming quickly for black, as the f2 pawn is hanging in. Queen g2 would already be made. Let's say d takes c7, queen f2, queen takes g2 is already checkmate. So white is forced to go rook d2. But what really shows talent, and that what makes really Anton Guijarro special, is that he puts pressure and he never lets go. So instead of bothering with that pawn, he immediately goes after that h2 pawn and sets up threats along this diagonal. g3, queen f6. Not only threatening to take on c3, having an x-ray on that rook, but also threatens to go queen f3 and set up a battery that way. Queen h1 and queen g2 mains are on tap in this situation. Rook c1, bishop c3. A very brave move, very much in the style of the young Spanish Grandmaster. He's giving up the bishop, saying, my attack will be quicker than yours, as you're just one move short of attacking me. Queen c3, queen f3, setting up this brutal battery. King f1, and here actually David Anton makes a slight inaccuracy, not something that you can fault for him, but in fact bishop e4 is not the most accurate move. It does take away some squares from the king, which attempts to run away via king e2, king d1, king c2, or even king e2, king d3, and c2, b1. However, it turns out that black had a winning continuation with queen h1, king e2, bishop f3 check, king d3, bishop e4 check, not letting that king run away through the c2 and b1 squares. Now king d4 is the critical move. However, king e2 would run into a beautiful, beautiful attack with rook takes f2, king takes f2, check, king e2, queen g2, king d1, and rook f1 checkmate. However, the big question is king d4, and I believe that David Anton might have missed the next idea. Now, not e5, pretty sure that he have seen e5, but king e5, rook e8, king d4, here the brilliant idea is queen f3. Just coming back coolly and calmly, and the king, believe it or not, is mated in the center, as after c5, queen f6 check, king c4, queen e6 again, keeping this king away from that b3 square. Queen d5 is checkmate. Not an easy line to find, but David Anton might have thought, I have no reasons to risk my advantage. Let's just keep this king at bay on f1. Rook e1, c takes d6, queen d4, rook d8, just bringing in another rook. Bishop c1, rook d7, queen takes b6, rook f7, queen d4, and it all seems to have been quieting down. However, David Anton has a specific beautiful finishing touch in mind. Queen h1 check, king e2, rook takes f2, king d1, queen takes c1. A brilliancy by David Anton. And after king e1, rook f1, king e2, rook f2, checkmate. Quite a brilliant win by David Anton, and that is kind of shows why you should learn all these systems, because once you get and understand how it works against G3, the G3 variation, you can actually use it against the E3 system. So I really hope this lesson on how to play the Christmas tree variation helped you appreciate this deep idea, and I hope to see you guys next time in the future. If you love this little video, please leave a like or comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.